your schedules to come learn about some pelvic floor stuff. I just wanted to get a feel for your exposure. Have any of you heard about pelvic floor physical therapy?
Yes.
You heard of it?
I work for the U and
Okay.
you get referrals for pelvic therapy.
Awesome. Has everybody heard of it, or is there anyone who hasn't heard of it before?
I mean, hearing of it and knowing what they do in it is different.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like there's a big jump there.
Yeah. Within 5 years ago, I feel like everybody I talked to had never heard of it. And I still talk to a bunch of my friends and they don't know it's a thing. I had a friend when I was in school, she had had her baby, it was like a year previously, and she was having some pelvic pain. And her physician told her it was just from her pregnancy and it would go away. And she dealt with it for like a year and was giving her pain during volleyball and running. And she finally reached out and I was like, no, there's tons we can do. And I was in school, so I didn't know what the heck I was doing at the time. But I gave her some things, and fortunately it helped her, and she was able to do those activities without any pain. But I'm glad that y'all have heard of it. That means the word is getting out that it's a thing and you don't have to deal with pelvic pain and all these other pelvic floor issues. But today, obviously, we're talking more focused on stress incontinence, which is peeing your pants when there's increased stress, whether it's in your daily life of coughing or sneezing, or it may just happen in exercise during certain movements. I'm curious though, has peeing during exercise been a barrier for you at any point, or like where you didn't want to exercise or you didn't choose to exercise because of it, or is it kind of more of just something you dealt with and it's an inconvenience?
You just choose not to do the jumping.
Okay, so you modify around it.
Yeah.
It's an inconvenience for sure, but it's like, I'm probably older. It's getting worse.
Getting worse?
Like, I'm buying things now.
Gotcha. Yeah. Anybody else, have you ever avoided either exercise altogether, or is everyone kind of just modifying around it?
I'm modifying.
They're all exercises. So.
Fantastic.
Nearby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do y'all feel like that's something you have to do? Like you have to make sure you use the bathroom right before your workout?
Yes.
Pretty common.
Entering, right?
In between, during, got it. Okay.
Immediately after.
All the things. All right. Well, it's just some fun facts to start with. A lot of people think that this only happens in people who have had children, but they found that even in high school female volleyball players, they found like 33-34% of those girls experienced it.
High school volleyball jump training was
Yes.
like horrible for me. I
Okay.
wanted to
Yeah, so that was just like one small study. I would love to get more data on that, getting the prevalence of it in high school athletes. So it definitely doesn't just happen after someone has had a baby. So when you're thinking about the pelvic floor, there's always some kind of resting tone in the pelvic floor, and that's just the amount of communication from your nerves to your muscles. So if there's a lot of high tone, that's when your muscles are kind of more firm and kind of there's like when you touch them, they're not as soft and pliable. There's just a little bit more firm, and that's when there's more tone. The muscles there's more tension there. And when there's low tone, it's really lax, and you feel it, and there's just not a lot there. It's just like really loosey goose. So your pelvic floor, you want it to be a good even amount of tone there, and most people probably carry more tone than less tone, to an extent, except for early after pregnancy. It can be stretched because obviously it goes through such a traumatic experience to it. But over time, a lot of people carry stress in their pelvic floor, and those muscles tend to kind of guard up and get tight there. And so you can either have a tight and weak pelvic floor or a long and weak pelvic floor. If you have a tight pelvic floor, there's usually pain associated with that. It can present in different ways though. It can present as back pain, it can present as pain with insertion, it can present as pelvic pain, like pelvic girdle pain, anywhere around there. So if you have a tight pelvic floor with pain and you leak urine, there's going to be a different approach to manage that versus someone who's got more of a lengthened pelvic floor and it's just weak that way. it's kind of like, if you think of like a shortened bicep here and you try to contract it, like you're trying to strengthen your pelvic floor, but if it's already shortened, the more you contract it, you're gonna have very minimal effect because you're not getting anywhere with it. You gotta lengthen it first before and then strengthen. Does that make sense, that analogy? So if you have a high tone pelvic floor, and you maybe have some pain, then takes a little bit more kind of diagnosing, and so not going to cover that side as much today. We're going to focus more on just some different strategies that you can use to see if it helps with managing it, and if these strategies aren't helpful, then that would be a time where maybe it's more beneficial to go in for a full assessment.
So I have a question about
yeah.
that. So if you can't go, then is that where it's too tight?
It could be.
Okay.
There could be some other things associated with it. So at the top I listed different types of incontinence. We're focusing on stress incontinence, which is where it's a mismanagement of pressure and intra-abdominal pressure. That's just pressure inside your abdomen. You're not managing your pressure well there, which leads to leaking of urine anytime that pressure increases. That's like the coughing and the sneezing, or the jumping, the impact, running, things like that. There are other different types of incontinence where maybe you aren't emptying your bladder fully, you have a difficult time urinating, and there's going to be other factors involved beyond just pressure management. So that would require a little bit more assessment to figure out what's going on there, but it can lead to incontinence because you're not fully emptying your bladder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not all the time. I was just wondering.
Yeah. So different ways to manage incontinence during exercise. There are things that we look at. We look at your breathing strategies. We look at your pressure management through your core. Your core starts at like your diaphragm, and the bottom is your pelvic floor, and then you got like this cylinder of pressure management around. It's not just your abs, it's not just your washboard. Front and obliques, things like that. So it's all the way around. You've got deep layers in your core, and then you've got, like I said, the bottom and the top to make up this cylinder to help you manage that pressure anytime the pressure increases. If you're not getting a good core contraction, you will be getting more pressure downward on the pelvic floor, which, if it's not able to support that, that can lead to some of the leakage of urine. So associated with pregnancy, everyone in their third trimester will experience diastasis rectus, where your linea alba is stretched, your midline is stretched, and then how long it takes to return is different for everyone afterwards. But it does happen in everyone, and it is something that can contribute, so it's something we like to look at if someone has some stress incontinence.
Does it have to be fixed with surgery?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And it can be, and after, like, if it's been a year and you still feel like there's some separation there, it's not the worst thing in the world. There's functional and there's non-functional DRA. So we're gonna talk about it, but I'm curious, has anyone ever been like checked for DRA? Has anyone, I can see you kind of working it there.
I think 23 years it still hasn't closed.
I've never been checked, but
I've never been checked.
Okay, so we're gonna check it right now if you're all good with that. So you check by laying on your back with your knees bent. So what you're feeling for at first, we're not lifting the head at all. I know it's gonna be touchy to look up, but keep your head down, laying on the ground, and then you're gonna feel a couple inches above your belly button and see if you can just feel any kind of tension in that midline, and just kind of feeling how far from side to side your abs are, and then
So we
you
should
can
be
feel.
flexing? We should be feeling
Nope.
that?
So flexing right now.
I don't feel my abs.
So yeah, it's not gonna be like super present. You should be nice and soft right now because you're not lifting your head. It's just kind of contracting it. But you're just getting a feel for what is there at rest. How far down can you go, and then how far to the side do you feel the wall of those abs?
How far down, as in past your belly button?
Like deep towards
deep.
the ground in
Okay.
your position.
Gotcha.
Good question. So from there you kind of walk down the midline. So now you're going down towards your belly button, doing the same thing. How far down does it go? And then you're gonna check below the belly button too, because you can have separation all along that midline, not just in one area. Then once you get a feel for that, then here's where you're going to do a little head lift. And so now you're going to be engaging those muscles, and you go back through those areas and you feel where those abs are. Can you fit more than one finger in there, 2 fingers? How wide is that space? Is there tension? Do you see any kind of like coning or doming in your abdomen? So just yeah.
I really have to dig for it, but it's there.
There you go. You feel it when you lift up. You might have to go a little deeper, but feeling side to side. Does anyone need help with this? They got a feel for it. So what you're looking for is there more than like 2 fingers width? That's kind of more like that's like more than normal separation, but like I said, at the end of the day, it's not the worst
More
thing
than 2 fingers?
in the world. Yeah, if anyone wants me to come, you know.
Yeah, what's wrong with me?
There's supposed to be
There is supposed to be a little dip.
a little dip, yeah.
A little dip?
Just don't want more than 2 inches.
I can't tell.
We wanna know. We just wanna know that we're normal. This is good conversation.
Think so? Come help me feel my belly button.
Jen's good with me.
Touch me, Larry.
Okay, hold on.
Most action I've had in weeks.
All right, now
This is being recorded.
we're done. That's not. Mine is totally bigger.
Well, you've had more kids than me.
Like I can actually put my
thought
fingers,
mine was-
and you can't.
Okay.
Like there's none.
All right, that's good.
Okay.
So why can't I sneeze?
Different. That's different.
Oh, fine.
That was probably on video too.
Good thing it can be edited. How old is your baby though?
Yeah.
I don't know why, I mean, I checked myself, I remember
It's
after
a
I had
little
baby,
longer
I was
after
really
each
confused.
one.
Feels like it. I only have 2.
But then I forgot all about it.
But you're teeny tiny anyway.
She's the expert.
But
How
I
big were your
feel
babies?
like I haven't ever focused on my core after having that baby. You know, like I just haven't ever.
Suck it in.
I'm like, I am
I wish that, like, when I had babies, they would have had those girdles back then to, like, pull it all back together like they wear now, but
Yeah, I've never worn one, but I should.
I should have when I
People
was,
say that they're amazing.
yeah.
That's good.
Does anyone else?
So Larissa, I'm getting her no on mine.
Oh, awesome.
Clinicals.
What was that?
She said, Larissa said you could help me with mine.
Yeah.
Just to show it.
So, Lori, is ours open then?
Mine is.
So,
Like I can dig in.
so I feel like I can't, and you can't, so we gotta work on that.
Yeah, like you know, and it was like
So many things we gotta work on.
it's like mine is a like it's
Add it to the list.
Right.
but yeah, I feel like mine.
I forgot why we were, why was this important?
For diabetes or something.
Fill it all back, right? Yeah, that's a good question. C-sections can affect it. No.
I was gonna say C-section. C-section because they have to cut the muscle this way versus your muscles run this way. So yeah, it can affect it big time.
Well, under my C-section.
Like, it's like obvious. And then you'll know what you're feeling on you. Cause mine's like, mine's like, you could put quarters in it.
See how you can fill that hole right there?
You always go on time to set up like on fingers in it. Sure, you probably
So trippy.
It's a perfect spot for body shots, Des.
Green line.
Hey, Sean.
Damn it, I knew I should have brought the tequila. Yeah, who's probably, well, I guess, next time we need a sign-up sheet.
Go back around there.
And it is spring break too, so it would have been perfect.
St. Patrick's Day. I did totally fit mine out.
Yeah, me and Lori are
Honestly.
That's for mine. I didn't either.
Des wants to touch you too, Larry.
Yeah.
This is her most.
But underneath my belly button.
I don't know if it could be fixed. It's been 23 years. 20.
My brother's kissing green.
Is that when they surgically go in there and like stitch them back so they're not, whoop, they're just
Functional, right here.
Exactly. So yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
talk about functional and non-functional. So
Okay.
say you were like concerned you have maybe 2 centimeter or 2 fingers width, maybe even more separation there. Then the thing you want to look for is, are you losing tension through that midline? And what that would look like is any kind of like pooch or coning through your midline, or like a wider doming type appearance, and you can kind of Google those to get a feel for what those look like. I didn't see it on anyone yet that I looked at here. So that would mean and then from there, if we do see that, then we're gonna cue to give a core brace where you're bracing those deeper core muscles, and then we're gonna go through that. But if after you brace and you're still seeing some of that coning or doming, then we know that you're not able to generate enough tension to manage that pressure in that position. So that would be more of a non-functional. Most of the time you can get enough tension generated through your core to generate enough pressure management to where it becomes functional. So you may have two finger widths there, but with cueing, you get your good core bracing, deeper core muscles activated, then it becomes functional at that point, and that coning will go away after you get those deeper core muscles firing. So that's just one thing that we're gonna look at when you got some weekend with your exercise. The second part of that is you may not have separation there, but that doesn't mean that you are bracing appropriately. So we're gonna talk about bracing strategies and what that means. So if everyone go back into that position, laying on your back, and put your fingers, so like if you have your hands on your hips, like to go in attitude, put your fingers right on the sides of your abdomen, and just give a little cough, like a fake cough or laugh, either one. And you'll feel head down while you do this, and you'll feel a little poke up into your fingers. You'll feel the muscles turn on there. And then you want to see, can you turn on those same muscles voluntarily? This is the brace that you're going to do when you're lifting heavy. A lot of people brace wrong. They bear down instead of brace. And anytime you're bracing, if you feel your pelvic floor, it should lift. You shouldn't be pushing down on the pelvic floor. So this is a really helpful strategy for people if they're bracing wrong, especially if they're leaking during heavy lifting. Maybe that's one of the activities that triggers it. We want to look at your bracing strategies to see if you're bearing down versus a good brace. So does anyone feel like they're having a hard time turning those muscles on? Or does it all feel pretty natural? Y'all work out, so it might feel natural. It's okay if it isn't.
So breathe.
It feels like the opposite with the cough.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel like it's contracting, it feels like it's pushing out.
Yeah, and it's gonna be like so.
It's the
So go ahead and do a brace.
You feel it in your abs.
Good. And then give me a cough. Yes, it is still functional. So if you still do a brace, so do a brace now. You feel it going back up. That's what's
I'm turning
happening.
like bright red.
The other thing with bracing is, can you breathe and brace at the same time? A lot of people get false brace by using their diaphragm and they hold their breath, and that is just increasing pressure as well.
So she felt the abs, but she peed a little. So she
Okay.
attack a little bit more.
Were you breathing?
No,
I
she
mean,
was
no, I was
Okay.
my breath trying not to pee a little more. I know, it's not worse.
Okay,
You can work on it though. It's not, you want to.
absolutely. So then, does anyone have any questions on that? We're still working on our bracing. We got a feel for it.
But you're still breathing through it, right?
So I'm bracing right now,
I'm bracing
and I
right
can
now.
talk and I can breathe.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it's just like holding everything in tight,
Yeah.
like good posture.
But it's not.
It's not sucking in. It's not sucking in your belly button. It's not It's not holding your stomach in, that's opposite. That's pulling everything in. A brace is gonna be just, if you're standing, like if I'm standing here, it's gonna be a slight tuck down, but your pelvic floor will rise. That's gonna
Are
be
you
a big.
squeezing your glutes at all?
You would be squeezing your glutes if you're looking for, if your brain is trying and reaching and trying to find those muscles,
Okay.
then you're gonna recruit other muscles to make it happen.
So I have a question about that.
Yes.
Because I follow this lady on Instagram.
Yeah.
Who she,
Viciously simple.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
She had twins. She had diastasis recti, and her first time going to a pelvic floor therapist, they told her, like, you basically try to like lift up a blueberry with your lady bits,
There you go.
and so they told her to do it,
Uh-huh.
and she was trying it, and then they're like, no, you're just contracting your anus, basically.
Gotcha.
And so, and I feel like that's what I do a lot. I feel like when I try to do it, I feel like I'm just punching up a.
So you're thinking more like a pelvic floor contraction versus like this contraction here? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so pelvic floor contraction, many or like know it as Kegel. Turns out that, I can't remember the stat, is like 70% or something of women do Kegels wrong. And if you have a shortened at all pelvic floor, a Kegel is not going to be helpful. So, but it should be a feeling of lifting, and it's the same muscle, like same feeling you would get if you were like trying to cut off the flow of urine while you were going to the bathroom.
And see, that's another thing is when you said you're supposed to be lifting and not like feeling like you're bearing down, I feel like when I go to tighten it, I feel like I am like
Bearing
pushing down instead of.
Yeah, so it just takes it takes some time. Yeah, it's a motor learning thing that your brain and these muscles, it's a connection that's just weak that needs to be trained, and would probably take some time to like for cueing and to assess and to feel what your pelvic floor is doing during that, to get more feedback for you. Does that make sense? But a good brace, like when you turn on those deep core muscles, it should give a pelvic, like it's like nearly impossible. I don't think it is possible to separate the two of a pelvic floor contraction and a deep core brace, your transverse abdominis, your TA. So the two should be working in sync, and if you feel like you're bearing down, then that would be something that you would want to kind of just dive into a little bit to see what's going on there, and to feel, is your pelvic floor relaxing or is it contracting with it? But a good brace, your muscles all around are on, they're firing, you can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can breathe at the same time, and you can feel your pelvic floor lift a bit.
So it's like you're
Lifting and
pulling up,
wrapping.
right?
Yep.
Like it feels like you're.
Another way.
Well, yeah, it's burying down, you're pushing,
I call it lift
trying
and
to
wrap.
push
Push
out,
the very out.
whatever, like
Yeah.
have a baby.
Question,
But
Yes.
the others, I don't know.
so if you're contracting and you
Uh-huh.
feel like you're bearing down, do you teach your brain
Do it
how
for me.
I am.
to contract at the same time as, so, yeah, like she says, like pulling up?
That's
Do
what
you
I feel
teach your
like.
brain to do it together?
Yes, so it's gonna be more of getting you to do it right, and then like getting the confirmation that that is right, so that you can practice that.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can like dissociate. Like you can't just be like, I'm gonna contract here and here. Like they come together if you're doing either one correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can do more of a pelvic floor contraction without getting TA as much, but when you're really getting a good TA contraction, you are gonna get pelvic floor lift.
So I feel it right here.
So
But you should also feel it lifting at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we're practicing this, should we be practicing it laying down like we're doing it now?
That's the
Or should
easiest
we-
position.
Like you're doing it standing up, so.
Exactly. So it's a progression.
Oh, it's a progression. Yeah.
It's a progression.
Then you work to your knees.
So
and then-
laying down, knees bent is gonna be the easiest.
It's true.
But
With
yeah.
the wet pad underneath the PC.
Okay.
Fucking
I
pads
saw
on.
where they like had to sit
Well,
like this
yeah.
and like do it,
And
but it
that's-
felt really hard.
Yeah.
Like
So-
sitting up, I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So it's it kind of depends, like what we get into, like in the clinic. Like I've had a patient and hers was coming on more with running, and so wanting to get her into more of a functional position related to running versus laying on laying on the table. So like laying on the table is like the bare basics. We want to get you off the table as quick as possible to get it into more functional relations to your activities where it's happening. But that's the start. So laying down with your knees bent is the start, and then it would be legs flat. Then it would be sitting. Then it would be standing. Then it would be squatting. So and things
And then
like
they
that.
do that while they're
Well,
working
you
out.
can tell I'm not peeing right
Not
now.
necessarily
Like,
like
do
we're
they
kind of.
intentionally think like I need to work that while I'm.
In treatment, depending on where when it's going on, we may get into that depending on the assessment. But ultimately, it's a coordination thing. Your brain will pick it up and it will know that it's supposed to go and it's supposed to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're good.
But you feel it right here.
Yeah.
Because you know you're tightening, yeah.
Are there certain things that
That's
we
what I
look
do,
at?
yeah.
Like if, you know, like
But
my
I'm not
mom
doing
used to
double
say
over.
when I was little, don't ever hold it, because if you hold it too long, then you're gonna damage your bladder or whatever. Are there certain things that you can do that is making it weak?
Good question. I don't know about weak. You never want to do it while you're actually going to the bathroom because you want a full emptying of your bladder. I had a patient, wasn't a patient, we were just kind of talking, and then she came back, she's like, yeah, I was practicing while I was going to the bathroom. And I'm like, no, that's not what I said. Like, do not stop the flow of urine while you're going to the bathroom. That's just as if you were stopping the flow of urine. That would be like a contraction. But we try to not use, we try to look at these other strategies first before we get into like the pelvic floor muscle training, because because it can be something that doesn't require that initially. So for example, the next one, or before we move on, does anyone want to talk more about the bracing? Is that
I have one more
Yeah.
question. I don't know if you're gonna talk more about the coning.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna bring that up again, or should I? Well,
Yes, ask away.
so I don't have diastasis, but I do, like when I do push-ups,
Mm-hmm.
I totally am coning, or like some leg lifts and stuff
Okay.
like that. Like
Yeah,
what-
so that would be, we would want to see, can you brace and then do like a leg lift, and then we want to see what's happening there. Does it go away? If not, then we want to gradually progress into those movements. So maybe you do a leg where your knee's bent and you do like a march instead. Something that's similar but not as challenging to where you can master that, and then you progress on. Cool? Any other questions about that stuff? Okay. So the other big part of bracing is the breathing. So you need to be able to brace and breathe at the same time. And breathing is something that can be super helpful if this is something that's, if you are peeing during your workouts, depending on what the circumstances are. So for example, one of my patients, she was having it with running, but it was weird, like she could run like the 6 miles or whatever, and then she would be running with her dog, so she would bend over to like mess with the dog leash or something, and then it was like, boom, it's like the floodgates opened. What happened? And so I was like, well, that's interesting, like, because you can handle it. Like, I was like, is this an endurance issue? Is your pelvic floor just all of a sudden turning off? Like, I wasn't sure, but I was like, let's just try a breathing practice. So we had her running in the clinic for just like, I don't know, half a mile or so, at a higher speed to simulate some fatigue, and then had her bend over before, and she's like, yep, I feel like it's gonna happen. And I was like, okay, well, let's try doing an exhale. Just exhale while you bend over. And so she did, and it was like instant change. So she just, in her runs, after she's trying to breathe, she's not breathing, and so she bends over, holding her breath, lots of pressure coming down, too much pressure for her pelvic floor to manage, and then that led to leaking. So just the act of breathing out while she bends over, she hasn't had any issues with it. So in your workouts, when you're fatigued, when you're working towards mid, it could be beginning, could be end, depending on when it's happening for you. Checking your breathing strategies. When you're tired and you're fatigued, that's probably the last thing you're thinking about is, are you breathing and how are you breathing? So being able to exhale, like maybe while you're jumping, or doing like a series of like impact exercises, can be effective in just helping you to manage that exercise. Does that make sense? Just a simple thing you can try to see if that makes a difference. It's a combination of things, and it's not like a one size fits all of this. You got to figure out what the situation is, what's leading to it, where is it happening, what are the patterns, and then figuring out which pieces are not there. Is it a bracing issue? Is it a breathing issue? Is it a strict pelvic floor issue? Is there other things going on? But these are like the big things that we can look at first. So the last thing is going to be pelvic floor muscle training, which is training to match when it's happening. So the most common times that women have reported leaking during exercise is jumping on a trampoline, doing jump rope, running, and then heavy lifting. A lot of people like post on Instagram or social media like that this is like an accomplishment, that you're lifting so heavy that you're like peeing, and then you can like see streams of it. It's crazy, like when they're like in competition. And so it's like, no, this is not something that should be like applauded or praised. Like this is a dysfunction. This is not normal. This is something that needs to be treated, because you have like, this is pelvic floor dysfunction. So it can happen. Maybe it's happening in your running and it's happening at mile 3. Maybe it's happening with quick explosive. Maybe it's like with jumping, or maybe it is with heavy lifting. So those each will require different types of pelvic floor training if that is what we assess to be the issue. But once again, we need to make sure that your pelvic floor is at a length that's a happy length, not a shortened state, or else pelvic floor muscle training is not going to be very effective. So you want to do your pelvic floor. It's a muscle just like all the other muscles in your body, and it can be trained to match the activity. So if it's happening at mile 3 and you're running, you're going to train for endurance. So you're going to be doing pelvic floor contraction that's like 50% of a max contraction, and you're going to try holding it for longer, and that's kind of the type of training that you're going to do. Versus if it's a strength, you're going to do a max contraction and hold it for the duration of 8 to 10 seconds, working up in that. Because if you're really lifting heavy, that could be the amount of time that you're having to sustain that pressure through the lift. And then the third one is going to be more power, where it's the jumping and the quick explosive one. And so it's going to be, can I fire maximally and can I turn it off? Quick, powerful contractions that you would train it that way. So you got to match your training to the condition that it's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know that was like a ton of information.
What would a sit-up be?
A sit-up?
Sit-ups, yeah.
I would say that's more, depends on how long you take to do the sit-up, I guess, but it would be a mix between power and strength. But also depends, is it happening on the first sit-up, or is it happening on like the 20th sit-up? That would be more of a strength endurance. So.
10th or 15th.
Yeah, so getting some fatigue, so you want to work on some sustained endurance, a mixture of strength and endurance there. And it doesn't have to just be one of them. You can kind of do a combination, just like any other muscle. You want it to be able to perform as the function demands. So, yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So is like sneezing a surprise? Is that like is that a quick
power?
Okay.
So there's like a little trick. If you feel like you're gonna sneeze or cough, you can try doing a contraction and see if that helps. If it doesn't, it may be that your pelvic floor is shortened already. So you're here and you try to squeeze and it's just not going much because you're here. And we need to get it lengthened before, so that you can have a happy length and functioning pelvic floor. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool.
So to figure out how long it is or short it is, we have to like, that's like a real exam.
Yeah, an exam is like the ultimate way. Typically, you can kind of go off of if you have any type of pain. Pain is usually like if you have any pelvic pain with insertion, that's like more than likely you've got high tone pelvic floor.
If you do, then you have a short one. Is that what you're saying?
More than likely, yeah. But you can also like, it doesn't even have to be like very painful. Like we do an external palpation on some of these muscles, and you'd be surprised at like some of the tenderness that's there. Like we were practicing and they were doing it on me, and I don't have necessarily pelvic pain, but I was like, ooh, that's kind of tender. So it's not like the only sign that it's shortened, but it is one sign.